Turbochargers took cars from fast to flat-out insane. From the Lotus Esprit Essex Turbo to the Maserati Bora Twin-Turbo and the rare 1985 Buick Riviera Turbo Convertible, these beasts packed serious boost. Buckle up as we count down 50 of the most outrageous turbocharged cars from the 1960s to the 1990s. This is pure forced induction madness. Kicking off the countdown at number 50 is the 1962 Chevrolet Corvair Monza Spider. If there's one car that broke all the rules in the early 60s, it was the Corvair Monza Spider. Chevrolet was out to prove that America could do rear-engine, air-cooled performance just as well as the Europeans, and they went all in with this experimental beast. At the heart of the Monza Spider was a 2.4-liter flat-six, force-fed by a turbocharger, making it one of the first American production cars to feature a factory turbo setup. Back in '62, this was groundbreaking, and that snail boosted output to a solid 150 horsepower, respectable for a lightweight compact car of its era. With a 4-speed manual transmission, it could hustle through the quarter mile in about 17 seconds, quick for an early 60s coupe. What really made the Monza Spider special was its handling. Unlike the turbocharged cars that would come later, the Monza Spider wasn't about straight-line speed. It was a canyon carver with a suspension set up for road-hugging performance, but it wasn't without controversy. Only 9,468 units of the Monza Spider were built in 1962, making it rare today. Surviving units in pristine condition command serious collector cash, with values ranging from $25,000 to $45,000 depending on originality and condition. For a slice of turbocharged history, this early GM experiment is an underrated legend. At 49, we've got the 1963 Oldsmobile Jetfire. Imagine the audacity, dropping a turbocharger on a lightweight, all-aluminum 3.5-liter V8 in the early 60s. That's exactly what Oldsmobile did with the Jetfire, creating one of the most radical performance cars of its time. Producing a stout 215 horsepower, the Jetfire had the muscle to outrun plenty of V8-powered machines in its class. But there was a catch. This turbo setup relied on a highly experimental water methanol injection system known as turbo rocket fluid. Without it, the high-compression engine would detonate under boost, leading to catastrophic failures. As innovative as it was, the Jetfire proved to be ahead of its time in the worst way. The complexity of maintaining the fluid system led to reliability nightmares, and many dealers converted Jetfires back to naturally aspirated setups to avoid customer complaints. That means truly original, turbo-equipped examples are extremely rare today. With only 5,842 units built, the Jetfire is a unicorn in the classic car world. A surviving factory model is worth a small fortune, often commanding upwards of $60,000 for a pristine specimen. But let's be real, this car wasn't just about the numbers. It was about attitude, about proving that Oldsmobile could think outside the box. Up next at 48 is the 1986 Dodge Daytona Turbo Z. Come mid-80s, Dodge was going all in on turbocharging, and the Daytona Turbo Z was one of the flagship performance machines. Packing a 2.2-liter turbo 2.4-cylinder, this front-wheel drive coupe churned out 146 horsepower and a healthy 170 pounds of torque. The Daytona Turbo Z wasn't the fastest car of its time, but it had something that most 80s American cars lacked: handling. The Turbo Z wasn't just about straight-line speed. It had a revised suspension setup, sportier shocks, and better aerodynamics than the base model. Pop-up headlights? Check. Rear window louvers? Check. It screamed 80s cool from every angle. While Dodge didn't publish specific production numbers for the Turbo Z trim, it remains a rare find today, especially in well-preserved condition. As for value, a solid Turbo Z can still be had for under $15,000. But mint-condition, low-mileage units have started climbing past $20,000. With 80s nostalgia at an all-time high, it's only a matter of time before this turbocharged underdog gets the recognition it deserves. And at number 47 is the 1992 Dodge Daytona IROC RT. The 90s weren't exactly the golden age of turbocharged muscle, but Dodge made one last push with the Daytona IROC RT. This wasn't just another turbocharged four-cylinder coupe. It packed some serious hardware. Under the hood was a 2.2-liter turbocharged and intercooled four-cylinder, but what made it truly special was a Lotus-designed dual overhead cam cylinder head. That exotic touch helped the little four-banger crank out a wild 224 horsepower, serious numbers for a front-wheel drive coupe in the early 90s. Performance? The IROC RT was a rocket, capable of hitting 60 miles per hour in around 6 seconds and running the quarter mile in the low 14s. And with an upgraded suspension, four-wheel disc brakes, and an aggressive body kit, the IROC RT looked the part too. This was no ordinary Daytona. It was a true performance machine. Production numbers are hazy, but estimates suggest fewer than 1,500 were built over its short lifespan. That makes surviving units rare, and prices are starting to reflect that. While you could once snag one for pocket change, pristine models now fetch anywhere from $20,000 to $30,000. If you're after a turbocharged 90s Dodge with real pedigree, the IROC RT is the one to get. Slotting in at number 46 is the 1990 Chevrolet Cavalier Z24 Turbo. The 1990 Chevrolet Cavalier Z24 Turbo is one of the most mysterious performance oddities to ever roll out of GM's test labs. Officially, Chevrolet never sold a turbocharged Cavalier, but behind the scenes, they built a handful of experimental Z24s fitted with a turbocharged 3.1-liter V6. With a staggering 230 horsepower, these unassuming front-wheel drive coupes could embarrass V8-powered muscle cars of the era. The forced induction setup transformed the Z24 from a peppy daily driver into a serious street sleeper. Turbo boost kicked in hard, delivering brutal mid-range acceleration that made the car feel downright unhinged. Torque steer was ferocious, the tires struggling to put the power down, making it a true handful to drive. Yet, Chevy decided against mass production, fearing reliability concerns and the risk of overshadowing its own performance lineup. Somehow, fewer than 10 of these factory-built test cars slipped through the cracks and ended up in private hands, making them among the rarest GM vehicles ever. Spotting one today is nearly impossible. Most enthusiasts don't even know they exist. But if you're lucky enough to find one, you're looking at a piece of lost GM history, a factory-built turbocharged Cavalier that was never meant to see the streets. Our pick at 45 is the 1989 Pontiac Turbo Trans Am 20th Anniversary Edition. The 80s weren't exactly a golden era for American muscle, but Pontiac proved otherwise with the 1989 Turbo Trans Am. To celebrate the 20th anniversary of the Trans Am, Pontiac pulled a move that no one saw coming. They borrowed the turbocharged 3.8-liter V6 from the legendary Buick Grand National and dropped it into the sleek aerodynamic body of the third-generation Firebird. The result? A factory-stock F-body that could humiliate Corvettes and Ferraris at the stoplight. Officially rated at 250 horsepower, real-world dyno tests showed this turbo V6 was underrated, putting down closer to 300 horsepower. That translated to 0 to 60 times of 4.6 seconds and a quarter mile time in the low 13s, making it one of the fastest production cars of its time. Only 1,559 89 turbo Trans Am turbos were ever built, making it a rare bird of the muscle car kingdom. Aside from its insane performance, the Turbo Trans Am came loaded with unique badging, leather-wrapped Recaro seats, and a suspension dialed in for handling. Today, these cars have become collector's gold, with mint examples fetching over $50,000. In the number 44 position is the Toyota Supra MK4 A80. When the Toyota Supra MK4 A80 arrived in 1993, it redefined Japanese performance. Toyota went all in, building a car that could take on the best from Europe. But it was the twin-turbocharged 2JZ GTE engine that cemented its legend. This 3-liter inline-six, equipped with sequential twin turbochargers, delivered 276 horsepower in Japan and 320 horsepower in the US. But that was just scratching the surface. In reality, the 2JZ GTE was underrated, with dyno numbers often showing closer to 350 horsepower stock. Power delivery was relentless, with the first turbo spooling early for low-end torque, and the second kicking in hard at 4,000 RPM, launching the Super Turbo to 60 miles per hour in 4.6 seconds and down the quarter mile in 13.1 seconds at 109 miles per hour. That put the MK4 A80 in the same league as the Porsche 911 Turbo and the Dodge Viper, but with a Toyota badge. Toyota built just over 45,000 Supra MK4 turbos, with only 11,239 landing in the US. The 6-speed V160 manual transmission models are the most desirable, with clean, unmodified units becoming increasingly rare. Prices have skyrocketed. Expect to pay $80,000 for a decent turbo model, while pristine, low-mileage cars can fetch $200,000 plus. And at number 43 is the 1980 Ford Fairmont Turbo Sprint. The Ford Fairmont was about as exciting as a tax return. Just another boxy, no-frills commuter car built to shuttle people from A to B. But for a select few, there was a hidden gem lurking in dealership backrooms, the Fairmont Turbo Sprint. Yes, a turbocharged Fairmont. At the heart of this unassuming sedan was a dealer-installed turbocharged 2.3-liter inline-4, boosting output to around 140 horsepower. That might not sound like much, but in the lightweight Fairmont, it was enough to turn the dull grocery getter into a surprisingly quick sleeper. Ford's turbo 2.3-liter was already proving itself in cars like the Mustang SVO, and in the Fairmont, it transformed the mundane into the unexpected. Production numbers for the 1980s Ford Fairmont Turbo Sprint are murky, with fewer than 100 rumored to have been built, making this one of the rarest turbo Ford oddities of the 1980s. Today, spotting one is almost impossible. Most are likely driven into the ground or stripped for parts. But if you ever see a Fairmont Turbo Sprint at a car show, know that you're looking at one of Ford's most obscure and outrageously unexpected turbocharged creations. Up next at 42 is the 1962 Oldsmobile Jetfire Turbo. The Jetfire wasn't just ahead of its time. It was a moonshot. Oldsmobile took a 3.5-liter aluminum V8, strapped on a Garrett T5 turbocharger, and created the first ever production turbocharged V8. But they didn't stop there. This beast needed a special water alcohol injection system dubbed turbo rocket fluid to keep detonation in check. At 215 horsepower and 300 pounds of torque, it embarrassed small block V8s of its era. Quarter mile? A solid 16 seconds. Respectable for a lightweight coupe in '62. Only 3,765 were ever built, making surviving examples rarer than hen's teeth, whatever that means. The car's innovative but finicky turbo system led to most being stripped of their forced induction. The Jetfire was a technical marvel that proved American automakers weren't afraid to push the envelope. It was also an early lesson in the complexities of forced induction, as many owners neglected to refill their turbo rocket fluid, leading to engine failures. Today, a properly restored Jetfire can fetch upwards of $75,000, with turbo-equipped survivors demanding top dollar. The rarity of an untouched original makes the '62 Oldsmobile Jetfire Turbo one of the most collectible turbocharged cars ever produced. Coming in the number 41 position is the 1978 Buick Regal Sport Coupe Turbo. This is where Buick's turbocharged legacy began. Before the Grand National, before the GNX, there was the 3.8-liter turbo V6 in the Regal Sport Coupe. With 165 horsepower and 245 pounds of torque, it packed serious punch for a ho-hum era coupe, proving that turbos weren't just for imports. The real magic? This setup paved the way for Buick's intercooled monsters of the 80s. A quarter mile in the mid-16s wasn't earth-shattering, but it showed what forced induction could do. Unlike the naturally aspirated V6 Regals, this version featured unique turbo badging and a specially tuned suspension to handle the extra power. While many dismissed it at the time, the '78 Regal Sport Coupe is now recognized as the blueprint for the legendary Grand National and GNX. Estimated at just 2,800 units, this one's ultra rare, especially in factory-correct turbo trim. These days, good luck finding one. Prices hover around $30,000 for clean survivors, with top-tier units reaching beyond that. With turbocharged Buick V6s becoming icons of the 80s, the Regal Sport Coupe Turbo is now a sought-after collectible by enthusiasts who appreciate its historical importance. Next at 40 is the 1980 Pontiac Firebird Turbo Trans Am Indy Pace Car. Pontiac put a turbo on a 4.9-liter V8 and made history. The 1980 Turbo Trans Am wasn't just a gimmick. It was the first turbocharged Indy 500 pace car. Pumping out 210 horsepower and a tire-twisting 345 pounds of torque, it was quicker than most smog-choked V8s of the era, running the quarter mile in the high 15s. The signature shaker hood now fed cool air to the turbo, and inside a futuristic LED boost gauge reminded drivers they were piloting something special. But what made this car truly unique was its Indy 500 pace car status, featuring a stunning white and black paint scheme with unique badging. Pontiac cranked out 5,700 of these pace cars, but surviving turbo models in pristine condition are getting harder to find. The Turbo 4.9 was a bold experiment, using a Garrett TB305 turbo to squeeze power out of an engine choked by emissions regulations. The result was a car that looked every bit as fast as its predecessors, but struggled with heat soak and inconsistent boost delivery. Expect to shell out $40,000 to $50,000 for a well-preserved unit, with low-mileage models hitting even higher. Despite its shortcomings, the Turbo Trans Am remains a significant piece of Pontiac's high-performance legacy. In the number 39 position is the 1980 Mustang Turbo Cobra. Ford knew the Mustang needed to stay relevant, but the big V8s of the 60s were long gone. Enter the Turbo Cobra. This fox-body pioneer packed a 2.3-liter turbocharged four-cylinder pushing 132 horsepower and 142 pounds of torque. Laughable by today's standards? Maybe. But in 1980, it gave the lightweight Cobra an edge against other early 80s ponies. Quarter-mile times hovered around 17 seconds, not blazing fast, but quicker than the naturally aspirated four-bangers choking the streets. Ford took a chance on turbocharging to keep performance alive while meeting fuel economy and emissions standards. The Turbo Cobra featured aggressive Cobra badging, a unique hood scoop, and bold striping to signal its intentions. It may not have had the raw power of its V8 siblings, but it represented the beginning of a new era for forced induction Mustangs. Ford only produced about 5,000 of these, making a factory-correct Turbo Cobra a unicorn today. Prices have crept past $20,000 for pristine models, with ultra-clean survivors bringing even more. While the later SVO Mustang stole the spotlight, the Turbo Cobra laid the foundation for Ford's future turbocharged performance machines, proving that a four-cylinder Mustang could still pack a punch. Coming in at number 38 is the 1979 Mercury Capri Turbo RS. The 1979 Mercury Capri Turbo RS was Ford's attempt at giving American muscle a European twist, and it came with a factory turbo to prove it. This second-generation Capri was basically a Mustang in a sleek, European-inspired shell. But what really set it apart was its turbocharged heart. Under the hood sat a turbocharged 2.3-liter inline-4, an iron block workhorse force-fed by a draw-through carbureted turbo setup, cranking out 131 horsepower and 142 pounds of torque. That might not sound like much today, but back in '79, this was a serious punch in a lightweight chassis. The Capri Turbo RS could hustle down the quarter mile in the high 16s, respectable for a turbo four-banger of its era. What made the Capri Turbo RS rare? It was a short-lived experiment, with Ford yanking the carbureted turbo setup after just a couple of years due to reliability concerns. Exact production numbers are murky, but spotting one today is a serious rarity. Unique features of the Capri Turbo RS include a sportier suspension, aggressive decals, and a blacked-out grille that made it stand apart from its non-turbo siblings. Today, a clean Capri Turbo RS is a unicorn, with values climbing north of $20,000 for well-preserved units, but finding one is half the battle. At number 37 is the 1986 Merkur XR4Ti. The 1986 Merkur XR4Ti was one of Ford's boldest moves, importing a turbocharged, rear-wheel European sports sedan into the US under a brand that almost nobody had heard of. This was, in essence, a rebadged Ford Sierra RS. But instead of the legendary Cosworth YB engine, it got the American-built turbocharged 2.3-liter Lima inline 4. With 175 horsepower and 200 pounds of torque, this thing was no slouch. It could rip through the quarter mile in the mid-15s, all while rocking a 5-speed manual and independent rear suspension, a rarity for an 80s American market car. The XR4Ti was a blast to drive, but it never really found its footing in the States. Between 1985 and 1989, only 42,464 units were sold, making it a rare sight today. Its outrageous biplane rear spoiler and wide fender design screamed European rally-bred aggression, yet it came with American turbo power, a strange but compelling mix. These cars are still sleeper hits in the turbo scene, with decent models running around $8,000 to $15,000. If you can find one, you'll have a forgotten turbocharged gem with genuine motorsport DNA. Up next at 36 is the 1980 Buick Century Turbo Coupe. You'd never expect the 1980 Buick Century Turbo Coupe to be a force to be reckoned with, but here's the kicker. This unassuming two-door was one of the first American cars to embrace turbocharged performance. Buick wasn't playing around when they dropped a 3.8-liter turbocharged V6 under the hood, an engine that would later evolve into the legendary Grand National Power Plant. In this early iteration, the turbo-fed V6 cranked out 175 horsepower, modest by today's standards, but a serious punch for 1980. The Century Turbo Coupe could clear the quarter mile in the mid-16s, impressive for a car that weighed over 3,300 pounds. Rarity? Off the charts. Buick made just 2,000 units of the Century Turbo Coupe, making it one of the most overlooked turbo Buicks ever built. The Buick Century Turbo Coupe arrived loaded with a beefed-up suspension, a functional hood bulge, and an unmistakable 1980s aero package. Unlike later turbo Buicks, this one flew under the radar. No blacked-out menace, just an elegant coupe hiding a boosted secret. Try finding one today. Prices have crept up in recent years, and a clean model will set you back $25,000 to $35,000. Number 35 is the 1989 Pontiac Turbo Grand Prix by ASC McLaren. Pontiac was on a roll in the 1980s, and the 1989 Pontiac Turbo Grand Prix by ASC McLaren proved they weren't afraid to push the boundaries of front-wheel drive performance. With only 751 units built in its debut year, this limited production coupe was a bold experiment in turbocharged American muscle, blending high-tech features with a serious punch under the hood. At its heart was a 3.1-liter turbocharged V6, enhanced by a Garrett T25 turbo that cranked out 205 horsepower and 220 pounds of torque. That was plenty to get this Grand Prix moving, and while it wasn't breaking records, it could hold its own with a quarter-mile time of 15.5 seconds at 86 miles per hour. Not bad for a front driver in '89. The power delivery was smooth but aggressive, making it one of the more exciting turbo cars of its era. What made the '89 Turbo Grand Prix stand out wasn't just the engine, it was the tech. This was one of the first regular production cars to feature a heads-up display, a feature that projected speed and other vital info onto the windshield, keeping the driver focused on the road. It also came loaded with a full digital dash, leather sports seats, and the unmistakable B4U body cladding, giving it a wide, aggressive stance. Finding an original 1989 Pontiac Turbo Grand Prix by ASC McLaren today isn't easy, and clean units are highly sought after. This was Pontiac experimenting with forced induction in a way few American automakers dared at the time, a turbocharged, tech-heavy sleeper that still turns heads decades later. Next at 34 is the 1992 Dodge Spirit RT. Nobody saw the 1992 Dodge Spirit RT coming. In an era where muscle cars were struggling to break 200 horsepower, Dodge turned to turbocharging and Lotus engineering to build the fastest factory four-door sedan in America. That's right, this unassuming box on wheels packed a turbocharged 2.2-liter dual overhead cam inline 4 developed with Lotus Magic, pushing out a jaw-dropping 224 horsepower and 217 pounds of torque. That was more power than a 5.0 Mustang GT in 1992. And this wasn't just fast, it was brutally quick. The 1992 Dodge Spirit RT could rip through the quarter mile in 14.5 seconds, embarrassing Camaros, Firebirds, and Mustangs. Roughly 1,200 units rolled off the assembly line, making the 92 Dodge Spirit RT Turbo rarer than most exotic cars of the time. The Spirit RT's secret weapon wasn't just its engine, it was the whole package. A 5-speed manual transmission, sport-tuned suspension, 4-wheel disc brakes, and a no-nonsense sleeper design meant it could walk the walk without any flashy gimmicks. Dodge even threw in Recaro-style bucket seats and unique badging to remind you that this wasn't your average Spirit. Prices for the 1992 Dodge Spirit RT are still shockingly low, but clean ones are getting harder to find. Expect to shell out $12,000 to $20,000 for one of the most outrageous factory turbo sleepers ever built. In the number 33 position is the 1987 Buick Regal Limited Turbo. When people talk about turbo Buicks from the 80s, the Grand National and GNX steal all the attention. But hiding in plain sight was the 1987 Buick Regal Limited Turbo, the ultimate wolf in luxury clothing. This wasn't just another G-bodied Regal. This was a Grand National in disguise, packing the same legendary turbocharged power but wrapped in a formal chrome-trimmed suit. Under the hood sat the now iconic turbocharged 3.8-liter V6, cranking out 245 horsepower and 335 pounds of torque, numbers that embarrassed plenty of V8 muscle cars at the time. This boost-fed beast could rip through the quarter mile in the high 13s, just like the Grand National. But unlike the all-black menace, the Regal Limited Turbo came with a full chrome grille, padded Landau top, and elegant wire-spoke hubcaps. Basically, it looked like something your grandfather would drive to Sunday brunch, until you floored it. What makes it outrageous? Stealth performance at its finest. With only 1,035 units ever built, the 1987 Regal Limited Turbo is even rarer than the GNX, making it one of the most overlooked turbo monsters of the era. How much today? $30,000 to $50,000 plus, depending on the condition. And the number 32 spot is for the 1979 Ford Mustang Turbo 2.3 hatchback. Ford shook things up in 1979 with the Mustang Turbo 2.3 hatchback, the first ever factory turbocharged Mustang. Instead of the traditional V8, this Fox body packed a turbocharged 2.3-liter inline-4, cranking out 140 horsepower and 160 pounds of torque. Solid numbers for a lightweight pony car in the late 70s. A single turbocharger forced air into the carbureted engine, delivering surprising mid-range punch and making it one of the quickest four-cylinder Mustangs of its time. The performance edge was real. This boosted Mustang could hit 60 miles per hour in under 10 seconds, keeping pace with some V8 rivals. The quarter mile came in around 16.5 seconds. Not earth-shattering, but proof that turbocharging was a viable alternative to displacement. Unfortunately, the carbureted setup and early turbo tech meant inconsistent reliability, leading many owners to abandon the platform in favor of V8 swaps or scrapyards. Finding a 79 Mustang Turbo 2.3 hatchback today is nearly impossible. While exact production numbers are unknown, clean survivors are extremely rare, as most were driven into the ground. With Fox body pricing climbing, a well-preserved Mustang Turbo 2.3 can fetch $15,000 to $20,000, and they're rising. This was Ford's first serious attempt at a turbo Mustang. Without it, the SVO, EcoBoost, and even modern Shelby variants might never have happened. Up next at 31 is the 1981 Buick Riviera Turbo. Buick isn't exactly the first name that comes to mind when you think of factory turbocharged cars. But back in 1981, they were way ahead of the game. Enter the Buick Riviera Turbo, a turbocharged front-wheel drive luxury coupe that mixed big car comfort with unexpected forced induction fun. Powering the 81 Riviera Turbo was Buick's legendary turbocharged 3.8-liter V6, the same engine that would later evolve into the fire-breathing Grand National motor. In Riviera form, it made 185 horsepower and 275 pounds of torque, a serious upgrade over the standard naturally aspirated V6. That torque figure was the real hero here. This thing pulled like a freight train off the line. Quarter-mile times hovered around the mid-16s. Not bad for a plush land yacht tipping the scales at nearly 4,000 pounds. But here's what made it completely outrageous. It was a turbocharged personal luxury coupe in 1981. Buick had the audacity to slap a turbo on a Riviera at a time when performance wasn't exactly a priority for land barges. The 81 Riviera Turbo was a true oddity, blending boost with a cushy ride, digital instrumentation, and wood-trimmed opulence. How rare? Only 1,246 units ever rolled off the assembly line, making the 81 Riviera Turbo one of the most elusive turbo Buicks ever built. Most people think of the Grand National when they hear Turbo Buick, but this Riviera was quietly setting the stage years earlier. Why does it matter today? Because it's a turbocharged Buick that isn't a GNX. If you're a fan of weird, forgotten performance cars, this one checks all the boxes. Values today? Surprisingly affordable. For now. A clean 81 Riviera Turbo can still be found for $10,000 to $15,000. Sliding in at number 30 is the Saab 900 Turbo. Turbocharging was a niche technology in the 1970s, mostly found in high-strung race cars or exotic performance machines. Then came the Saab 900 Turbo, the car that brought boost to the masses. Launched in 1978, this Swedish-built machine took a practical 2.0-liter B-Series inline-4, strapped on a Garrett T3 turbo, and gave everyday drivers a serious power bump. It wasn't just about more horsepower. It was about usable, turbocharged performance in a daily driver. Early models produced 143 horsepower, but by the time the 900 Turbo Aero, dubbed SPG in North America, arrived in the mid-80s, output climbed to 175 to 185 horsepower with increased boost pressure and an intercooler. The 0 to 60 time dropped to 7.5 seconds, and the quarter mile was handled in the low 16s. While this might not seem wild today, in the 80s, it was enough to embarrass some V8 muscle cars. Saab's automatic performance control system was groundbreaking, adjusting boost levels on the fly to prevent detonation. The front-wheel drive layout gave it confident handling, and the aircraft-inspired cockpit and wraparound windshield made it unmistakably Saab. Over 900,000 Saab 900s were produced, but the Turbo Aero SPG models were far rarer, with only 7,625 built. Finding a well-kept SPG today is tough. Expect to pay $20,000 to $40,000, with pristine units exceeding $50,000. And at number 29 is the 1985 Buick Riviera T-Type. The 1985 Buick Riviera T-Type was where luxury met forced induction, a turbocharged 3.8-liter V6 stuffed into a plush, full-size personal luxury coupe. Buick wasn't just experimenting with turbocharging in the 1980s. They were perfecting it, and the Riviera T-Type proved that a big, comfortable cruiser could still pack serious punch. This wasn't your grandpa's Riviera. This was a boosted boulevard bruiser with 185 horsepower and a monstrous 300 pounds of torque, giving it serious off-the-line grunt. Equipped with sequential fuel injection and a Garrett supercharger, the Riviera T-Type had smooth but strong acceleration, hitting 60 miles per hour in around 9 seconds. Respectable for a luxury coupe, tipping the scales at over 3,800 pounds. The front-wheel drive setup provided effortless cruising, but the turbo's torque made highway passing a breeze. Unlike its sportier Grand National sibling, the Riviera T-Type flew under the radar, offering muscle car torque without sacrificing comfort. Buick built just 1,069 units in 1985, making this one of the rarest turbo Buicks of the decade. Prices today vary wildly, but well-preserved examples are becoming increasingly sought after, especially as turbo Buicks continue to gain recognition. Next up, at number 28, is the Porsche 911 Turbo 930. Turbocharging in the 1970s was still an experimental game, but Porsche wasn't afraid to push boundaries. The Porsche 911 Turbo 930 debuted in 1975, bringing forced induction to the legendary rear-engine platform. The result was nothing short of explosive, both in performance and reputation. Early models were notorious for their boost lag punch and tail-happy handling, earning the 930 Turbo its Widowmaker nickname. Under the rear deck lid sat a 3.0-liter flat six, boosted by a single Triple K turbocharger. This setup cranked out 256 horsepower in its debut year, insane for the time. In 1978, displacement increased to 3.3 liters, and an intercooler was added, pushing output to 296 horsepower. That meant 0 to 60 in around 4.9 seconds, and a quarter mile time of 13.5 seconds, putting it toe-to-toe with exotics like the Ferrari 512 BB. The 930 Turbo wasn't just about raw speed. It had massive flared fenders, a signature whale tail rear spoiler, and wide Fuchs wheels. Rear engine weight distribution made it a handling beast, but the on-off nature of the Turbo made it unforgiving to the unskilled. Between 1975 and 1989, Porsche built around 21,589 units, with early non-intercooled 3.0-liter cars and late production 5-speed G50 gearbox models being the most sought after. Today, prices vary wildly, with driver-conditioned cars starting at $120,000, while low-mileage or rare spec models easily exceed $250,000. Coming in at 27 is the Nissan GT-R R32. By the late 80s, Nissan had one mission: dominate Group A racing. The Nissan GT-R R32 wasn't just built for the track, it was built to win. When it launched in 1989, it earned the nickname Godzilla because nothing could touch it on the circuit. Under the hood sat the legendary RB26 DETT, a 2.6-liter twin-turbocharged inline-six designed to handle much more power than advertised. Officially, it made 276 horsepower due to Japan's voluntary horsepower cap, but real-world figures showed closer to 300 horsepower stock. The all-wheel drive system gave the GT-R R32 unreal grip, while Super Hikus four-wheel steering made it razor-sharp in the corners. With a 5-speed manual, it launched to 60 miles per hour in 4.7 seconds, with a quarter-mile time of 13 seconds at 108 miles per hour. On the track, it crushed the competition, winning 29 out of 29 races in Japan's Group A Touring Car Championship. Nissan produced 43,937 GT-R R32s, but fewer than 5,000 were V-Spec or V-Spec 2 models, which had upgraded brakes and suspension. The Nismo GT-R R32, limited to 500 units, is the rarest. Today, clean GT-R R32s start around $50,000, but unmodified low-mileage cars fetch $150,000 plus. Special editions and Nismo models, easily over $250,000. Up next at 26 is the Lancia Delta HF Integrale. Few cars define rally dominance like the Lancia Delta HF Integrale. Born from the fire of Group A competition, this turbocharged all-wheel drive monster cemented Lancia's place in World Rally Championship history. Between 1987 and 1992, the Delta HF Integrale won 6 consecutive WRC titles, a record that still stands. Unlike many rally-bred machines, the Delta HF Integrale wasn't just a stripped-out racer. It was a road-going beast that gave everyday drivers a taste of turbocharged rally performance. At its heart was a 2.0-liter turbocharged inline-4, starting with 185 horsepower in the 8V model and climbing to 215 horsepower in the Evolution 2. The boost came from a Garrett T3 turbo, delivering relentless power through a permanent all-wheel drive system with a front-to-rear torque split of 47-53, ideal for rally stages or carving up back roads. The 0 to 60 time, 5.7 seconds, with a quarter mile in the mid-14s. Each iteration of the HF Integrale improved on the last, with the Evolution models featuring wider tracks, better aerodynamics, and improved suspension. Only 44,296 Delta HF Integrales were built, with special edition models among the rarest. Today, expect to pay $60,000 plus for a clean Evo 1, while pristine Evo 2 models easily surpass $100,000. Special edition ones, over $150,000. Sliding into number 25 is the 1989 Shelby CSX VNT. By the late 80s, Carroll Shelby was cooking up some seriously wicked turbocharged compacts. The Shelby CSX VNT was the final and arguably the best of his Dodge-based hot hatches. What made it so special? It was the first production car to feature a variable nozzle turbocharger, technology typically reserved for high-performance diesel engines. Under the hood sat a 2.2-liter turbocharged four-cylinder, cranking out 175 horsepower and 205 pounds of torque. That may not sound like much in today's world, but in a lightweight front-wheel drive rocket, it means serious performance. The CSX VNT could blast through the quarter mile in about 14.8 seconds, quicker than many contemporary V8s. The turbo setup eliminated traditional drag, delivering power smoothly across the rev range, making this one of the most advanced turbo cars of its time. Only 500 units were produced, each wearing an unmistakable exotic red paint job with gold wheels. Inside, the car was all business. Sporty bucket seats, Shelby badging, and a no-nonsense driver-focused cockpit. Today, the CSX VNT is a collector's dream, with prices hovering between $25,000 and $35,000 for a clean unit. In at number 24 is the Volkswagen Scirocco Turbo. The Volkswagen Scirocco never got the same spotlight as the GTI, but a few rare turbocharged versions turned it into a serious performance machine. In 1978, Volkswagen teamed up with Callaway Cars to create the Callaway Turbo Scirocco for the US market. The 1.7-liter inline-4 with a Ray J turbo bumped output from 78 to 117 horsepower, slashing 0 to 60 times to 7.5 seconds, blistering for the era. Only 125 were built, making it a rare collectible today, with values hitting $30,000 plus. In Europe, the Zender Z40 Turbo Scirocco took things even further. Featuring a wide-body design and a 1.8-liter turbocharged engine, it delivered around 180 horsepower and was built for the track. With only a handful ever made, prices exceed $50,000. Decades later, the MTM Volkswagen Scirocco R refined the formula. Based on the factory turbocharged 2.0-liter inline-4, MTM tuning pushed power past 350 horsepower, dropping 0 to 60 times to 4.6 seconds and the quarter mile to the mid-12s. These tuned versions remain highly sought after, often commanding $40,000 to $60,000. With Volkswagen discontinuing the Scirocco in 2017, these turbocharged models are true collector's cars. If you find one, don't hesitate. Chances are, you won't see another one anytime soon. Up next at 23 is the Mazda RX-7 FD. The Mazda RX-7 FD is a masterpiece of engineering. Lightweight, perfectly balanced, and powered by one of the most unique turbocharged engines ever built. At its heart is the 13B REW, a 1.3-liter twin-rotor Wankel engine with sequential twin turbochargers. The setup used a small turbo for low-end response and a larger one for high RPM power, delivering 276 horsepower officially, though real figures were closer to 290 plus. With a 0 to 60 time of 4.9 seconds and a quarter mile in the low 13s, the RX-7 FD was a true performer. What made the RX-7 FD special was its lightweight chassis, just over 2,800 pounds, and superb handling thanks to a perfect 50-50 weight distribution. Mazda kept the design sleek, aerodynamic, and free of unnecessary weight. This was a driver's car in every sense. Rarity depends on the trim. In total, over 68,000 units were produced globally, but US sales stopped in 1995, making American market cars harder to find. The rarest editions include the Spirit R, limited to 1,500 units in Japan, and the RZ, built in just 175 examples. Prices have skyrocketed, with clean RX-7 FDs going for $50,000 to $90,000, while low-mileage Spirit Rs command well over $100,000. Coming in at number 22 is the Audi Quattro. The Audi Quattro didn't just change rally racing. It redefined what performance cars could be. Before its debut, all-wheel drive was for off-roaders, not high-performance machines. Then Audi bolted a turbocharged 2.1-liter 5-cylinder under the hood, paired it with a permanent all-wheel drive system, and the game changed overnight. Early models made 197 horsepower, but by the end of production, power had climbed to 217 horsepower, pushing the Quattro to 0 to 60 in 6.7 seconds and the quarter mile in the high 14s. Impressive for its time. What made the original Quattro special was its ability to deliver grip in any condition. While rear-wheel drive rivals struggled for traction, the Quattro put its power down effortlessly. It dominated the World Rally Championship, winning multiple victories. Audi produced 11,452 units, but many were driven hard and few remain in pristine condition. The rarest is the Sport Quattro, a homologation special with a shortened wheelbase and a 302 horsepower 2.1-liter turbo engine. Only 214 were built, making it one of the most sought-after Audis ever. Prices vary wildly. Standard Quattros fetch $50,000 to $100,000, while a Sport Quattro can easily exceed $500,000. Turbocharged all-wheel drive performance started here, and it never looked back. At number 21, it's the Ford RS200. The 1989 to 1986 Ford RS200 was built for one reason: Group B rally domination. Ford needed a mid-engine all-wheel drive monster to take on Audi, Lancia, and Peugeot, so they designed the RS200 from the ground up. Under its lightweight fiberglass shell sat a 1.8-liter turbocharged Cosworth BDT inline-4, cranking out 250 horsepower in road-going form. This was just a starting point. Rally spec versions easily pushed past 450 horsepower, while the fire-breathing RS200 Evolution made over 600 horsepower with a larger 2.1-liter turbo engine. With a featherweight 2,646-pound chassis, the RS200 could launch from 0 to 60 in just 3.8 seconds, making it one of the quickest cars of its time. The quarter mile? Mid-12s, faster than anything on the road in the mid-80s. The advanced all-wheel drive system paired with a front mid-engine layout gave it razor-sharp handling, but Group B's dangers cut its career short before it could prove its full potential. Ford was required to build 200 road-going RS200s for homologation, but only 146 standard models and 24 Evos were completed, making them exceptionally rare. Today, an original RS200 sells for $250,000 to $400,000, while Evolutions can reach $500,000 plus. Next, at number 20, it's the Mitsubishi Lancer Evolution 6. The Mitsubishi Lancer Evolution 6 wasn't just another fast sedan. It was a precision-tuned rally weapon, purpose-built to dominate both the streets and the WRC stage. By the time the Evo 6 launched in 1999, Mitsubishi had already established itself as a force in rally racing, and this version refined everything that made the earlier models great. At its core was the legendary 4G63T 2.0-liter turbocharged inline-4, now benefiting from better cooling, an upgraded intercooler, and a larger oil cooler to withstand extreme driving conditions. It produced 276 horsepower and 274 pounds of torque, sending power to all four wheels through Mitsubishi's active yaw control system, giving it razor-sharp cornering and unmatched grip. With a 0 to 60 time of 4.4 seconds and a quarter mile in about 13 seconds, the Evo 6 wasn't just quick for its time. It embarrassed far more expensive sports cars. The Tommy Mäkinen edition, named after the four-time WRC champion, made this model even more special with a quick steering rack, revised turbo, and rally-inspired suspension tweaks. Only about 8,000 units of the TME were produced, making it highly sought after today, with clean models fetching over $75,000. For number 19, it's the Volvo 850 T5R. The 1994 to 1996 Volvo 850 T5R was anything but your typical family wagon. Volvo, known for safety and practicality, went rogue and built a turbocharged sleeper that could outrun most sports cars. Under the hood sat a turbocharged 2.3-liter inline-5, co-developed with Porsche, producing 240 horsepower and 221 pounds of torque. Serious numbers for a front-wheel drive wagon in the mid-90s. Made it to either a 5-speed manual or a 4-speed automatic, the T5R could launch from 0 to 60 in 6.5 seconds and rip through the quarter mile in 15 seconds flat, faster than a contemporary BMW 325i. Volvo even threw in a limited slip differential, a sport-tuned suspension, and massive 17-inch Titan wheels to keep it planted. Production was strictly limited to 5,500 units worldwide, with only 185 yellow T5Rs making it to the US, making these wagons rare today. The 850 T5R laid the groundwork for every fast Volvo that followed, proving that a turbocharged brick could be just as thrilling as any other sports car. Prices for well-kept T5Rs range from $20,000 to $40,000, with rare colors like cream yellow commanding even more. A boxy, turbocharged mishal with Porsche DNA, the 850 T5R is a legend among sleepers. And now, on to number 18, we have the Ferrari F40. The Ferrari F40 was the last car personally signed off by Enzo Ferrari, and it was built with one goal: raw, uncompromising speed. Under the Kevlar and carbon fiber body, a 2.9-liter twin-turbocharged V8 pushed out 471 horsepower and 426 pounds of torque. Ferrari ditched luxuries like carpets and door handles to keep the weight at 2,425 pounds, resulting in a 0 to 60 time of 3.8 seconds and a quarter mile in the 11.8 second range at 124 miles per hour, staggering for the late 80s. The F120A twin-turbo V8 was Ferrari's last forced induction engine for over 2 decades until the California T arrived in 2014. With huge lag before the turbos spooled, the power hit like a sledgehammer. No traction control, no ABS, just a gated 5-speed manual, a mechanical limited slip diff, and pure analog brutality. Originally planned for 400 units, demand forced Ferrari to build 1,315 for global markets, with 213 officially imported to the US. Despite those numbers, the F40 remains one of the most coveted Ferraris ever made. Values have soared well past $2 million, with pristine low-mileage units selling for $3 million plus. At number 17 is the 1983 Alfa Romeo Giulietta Turbo Delta. The 1983 Alfa Romeo Giulietta Turbo Delta was Alfa's first production turbocharged model, built to bring turbo power to the streets while staying true to the brand's motorsports heritage. Under the hood sat a turbocharged 2.0-liter inline-4 developed in collaboration with Swiss tuner Auto Delta, Alfa's in-house racing division. With 168 horsepower and a 5-speed manual, the Giulietta Turbo Delta was no ordinary Italian sedan. It was a lightweight rear-wheel drive turbo rocket built for enthusiasts. With a curb weight of just 2,800 pounds, the Giulietta Turbo Delta could hit 0 to 60 in around 7.5 seconds and power through the quarter mile in about 15.5 seconds. Serious performance for an early 80s turbo sedan. A limited slip differential, upgraded suspension, and aggressive bodywork, including flared wheel arches and unique badging, set it apart. Its raw, boost-happy turbo setup delivered a surge of power past 3,500 RPMs, making it an absolute blast to drive. Only 361 units were produced, making the Giulietta Turbo Delta incredibly rare today. Prices vary depending on condition, but if you can even find one, expect to pay $30,000 to $50,000 for a well-preserved unit. A true hidden gem, the Giulietta Turbo Delta paved the way for Alfa's future turbocharged performance models, blending classic Italian character with early forced induction. Next, at number 16 is the BMW 2002 Turbo. The 1973 to 1974 BMW 2002 Turbo was a game changer. BMW's first turbocharged production car and one of the earliest forced induction street machines ever built. Taking the already nimble 2002 platform, BMW bolted on a Triple K turbocharger to its 2.0-liter M10 inline-4, boosting output to 170 horsepower and 177 pounds of torque. This was serious power for the early 70s, launching the 2002 Turbo from 0 to 60 in 6.9 seconds and through the quarter mile in around 15 seconds. This was a no-compromise driving car. Turbo lag? Absolutely. It didn't hit full boost until around 4,000 RPM, then surged forward like a missile. The rear-wheel drive setup, stiff suspension, and manual gearbox demanded skill, rewarding those who mastered its unpredictable power band. Visually, it was unmistakable. Boxy fender flares, deep front air dam, and the legendary 2002 Turbo mirror image script on the front spoiler. BMW built only 1,672 units, making the 2002 Turbo extremely rare today. Prices have climbed steadily, with well-kept models commanding $150,000 or more. It paved the way for BMW's future M cars and turbocharged performance sedans, proving that forced induction had a place in everyday performance. Number 15 is the 1980 Zimmer Quicksilver Turbo. Most people have never heard of the Zimmer Quicksilver, let alone the turbocharged version. Built on a stretched Pontiac Fiero chassis, the coach-built coupe was draped in luxury while secretly packing a factory-boosted 2.8-liter V6. Estimated at 200 horsepower, it turned what was supposed to be a rolling statement piece into a sleeper. With just 170 units produced, this might be one of the rarest turbocharged American cars of the era. Unlike the lightweight Fiero, the Quicksilver was built for style, with an elongated hood, plush leather interior, and classic wire wheels. But the turbocharged version was something different, a true performance sleeper wrapped in a luxury coupe's body. Turbocharging the 2.8-liter V6 gave it surprising power, making it one of the quickest boutique cars of its time. Today, finding one in any condition is tough. Prices for a clean Quicksilver hover around $35,000, but turbocharged models, if you can even track one down, are in a different league entirely. While it never became a household name, the Zimmer Quicksilver Turbo stands as one of the most outrageous forced induction oddities to ever roll out of an American factory. Coming in at number 14 is the Mercedes-Benz 300 SD W116. The 1978 to 1980 Mercedes-Benz 300 SD W116 wasn't about high-revving turbocharged gas engines. It was about something just as groundbreaking. This was one of the first production turbo diesel cars ever, bringing forced induction to the world of efficiency, durability, and long-haul cruising. Under the hood sat the 3.0-liter turbocharged inline-5, producing 110 horsepower and 168 pounds of torque. That may not sound like much, but for a diesel-powered luxury sedan in the late 70s, it was a game-changer. The Garrett turbocharger eliminated the sluggishness of naturally aspirated diesels, giving the 300 SD more torque and better highway performance while maintaining legendary Mercedes reliability. While its 0 to 60 time of around 13.5 seconds wasn't blistering, this car wasn't built for drag racing. It was built for effortless highway cruising. The turbocharger boosted efficiency, helping the 300 SD achieve nearly 30 miles per gallon on the highway, a huge deal in the era of skyrocketing fuel prices. Paired with Mercedes' renowned build quality, the 300 SD could pile on hundreds of thousands of miles with ease. Only 28,634 300 SD W116 units were produced, making them a rare sight today. Well-maintained models can command $30,000 to $50,000, but high-mileage survivors are still running strong. Number 13 is the 1984 Dodge M4S Turbo Interceptor. If there was ever a car that looked like it came from the future, it was the Dodge M4S Turbo Interceptor. This thing wasn't just built for show. It was a legit technological marvel designed to push the limits of what Dodge engineers could cook up in the 80s. You might recognize it from the Wraith, where it played the role of an uncatchable, otherworldly street racer. But this wasn't just Hollywood smoke and mirrors. This prototype packed a wicked punch under the hood. At its core was a turbocharged 2.2-liter Cosworth-headed inline-4, cranking out a monstrous 440 horsepower, outrageous for a four-cylinder in 1984. That power translated to a blistering 0-60 time of 4.1 seconds and a mind-bending top speed of 194.8 miles per hour. Built as a technological demonstrator, only 4 functional units ever rolled out, making the Dodge M4S Turbo Interceptor one of the rarest turbocharged machines ever conceived. With its sleek, low-slung body, scissor doors, and race-ready suspension, the M4S was a supercar in every sense of the word. Today, if you were somehow lucky enough to find one, it'd be priceless. This wasn't just a car, it was an engineering statement, a legend on wheels, and one of the greatest turbocharged monsters ever built. Up next at 12 is the Aston Martin V8 Vantage Zagato. The 1986 to 1990 Aston Martin V8 Vantage Zagato was a no-compromise, high-performance machine born from Aston Martin's collaboration with Italian coach builder Zagato. Based on the already powerful V8 Vantage, this version was lighter, more aggressive, and brutally fast. It packed a twin turbocharged 5.3-liter V8, delivering 432 horsepower and 395 pounds of torque. Serious numbers for its time. Capable of 0-60 in just 4.8 seconds and reaching a top speed of 186 miles per hour, it was one of the fastest production cars of the late 80s. Unlike Aston Martin's traditional Grand Tourers, the Vantage Zagato was stripped down for maximum performance. Weight-saving measures included an aluminum body, no rear seats, and minimal interior comforts. The design, crafted by Zagato, featured a compact, muscular stance with aggressive lines, emphasizing function over elegance. Aston Martin built just 89 coupes and 37 convertibles, making it one of their rarest turbocharged creations. Values today range from $500,000 to over $1 million, depending on condition. The V8 Vantage Zagato remains an ultra-rare collector's dream, a raw turbocharged powerhouse that perfectly blends British engineering with Italian styling. And at the number 11 spot is the Roof BTR. The 1983 to 1989 Roof BTR wasn't just a modified Porsche. It was a fully re-engineered supercar built by Alois Roof's legendary tuning house. Roof took a standard Porsche 911, stripped it down, and transformed it into something far more extreme. The BTR Turbo Roof packed a 3.4-liter turbocharged flat 6, producing 374 horsepower and 354 pounds of torque, outpacing the factory 911 Turbo 930. That power launched the BTR from 0-60 in just 4.7 seconds and pushed it to a staggering 190 miles per hour top speed, making it one of the fastest street-legal cars of the 1980s. A 5-speed manual gearbox replaced Porsche's 4-speed, giving it better power delivery, while upgraded suspension, brakes, and aerodynamics made it far more capable on both road and track. Unlike Porsche's notoriously tail-happy 930 Turbo, the BTR was more balanced and predictable at high speeds, making it a true driver's machine. Each roof BTR was built to order, and fewer than 20 factory-built cars exist today, making it one of the rarest and most desirable roof models. Values have skyrocketed, with pristine BTRs commanding over $500,000 under the hammer. Coming in at number 10, it's the Jaguar XJ220. The 1992 to 1994 Jaguar XJ220 was supposed to be a V12-powered all-wheel drive hypercar. But what the world got was something different, yet still an absolute monster. Jaguar ditched the heavy V12 and complex all-wheel drive system in favor of a 3.5-liter twin-turbocharged V6, the same power plant derived from the Jaguar Metro 6R4 Group B rally car. This change sparked controversy, but it didn't stop the XJ220 from becoming the world's fastest production car, hitting 213 miles per hour, a record it held until the McLaren F1 came along. With 542 horsepower and 475 pounds of torque, the XJ220 could rocket from 0 to 60 in just 3.6 seconds, thanks to its lightweight aluminum chassis and aerodynamic design. The twin Garrett T3 turbochargers gave it an explosive mid-range power band, delivering brutal acceleration that could overwhelm the rear tires if not handled properly. Despite the backlash over missing V12, the XJ220 proved itself as a genuinely capable and brutally fast supercar. Jaguar planned to build 350 units, but only 281 were completed, making it an ultra-rare collector's item today. Once undervalued, the XJ220 has surged past $600,000 at auctions, with pristine units fetching even more. The number 9 spot goes to the Vector W8 Twin-Turbo. The 1990 to 1993 Vector W8 Twin-Turbo wasn't just a supercar, it was a fighter jet for the road. Built by an aerospace engineer, the W8 was an insane mix of aviation technology and raw turbocharged power, unlike anything else seen before or since. Beneath its aggressive, wedge-shaped Kevlar and carbon fiber body sat a 6.0-liter twin-turbocharged V8 sourced from a racing-spec Chevrolet small block. With 625 horsepower and 649 pounds of torque, and reportedly capable of over 1,000 horsepower in unrestricted form, the W8's power was nothing short of shocking. Mated to a 3-speed automatic transmission, the twin Garrett turbochargers delivered a 0 to 60 time of just 3.9 seconds and top speeds exceeding 218 miles per hour, figures that put it in direct competition with the Jaguar XJ220 and McLaren F1. The aircraft-inspired cockpit featured a digital dash, dozens of buttons, and a NASA-style multifunction display, making it look more suited for a spaceship than a street-legal car. Only 17 W8s were ever built, making it one of the rarest supercars ever produced. With such limited production and its outrageous performance, the Vector W8 commands well over $500,000 today, with some listings pushing past $1 million. Next, at number 8, we've got the 1964 Studebaker Avanti R3. The Studebaker Avanti R3 was one of the most radical American performance cars of the 1960s, and today it stands as one of the rarest. Powered by a supercharged 304.5 cubic inch V8, the R3 was factory rated at 335 horsepower and capable of 168 miles per hour, outrageous speed for its time. Developed by Paxton's Andy Granatelli, the R3 featured forged internals, a hot cam, and improved cooling, making it the most powerful Studebaker engine ever put into a production car. The Avanti's futuristic fiberglass body was aerodynamically advanced, allowing it to compete with the best from Europe. Despite its engineering brilliance, Studebaker's financial troubles meant only 9 factory-built Avanti R3s ever rolled off the line before production ended in 1964. This makes it one of the rarest American muscle cars ever produced. Today, an original Avanti R3 is nearly impossible to find, with values often exceeding $150,000 when they do surface. With its unique styling, supercharged performance, and extreme scarcity, the Avanti R3 remains a forgotten legend of American speed. And on to number 7, it's the 1987 Buick GNX. The 1987 Buick GNX wasn't just another Grand National. It was the ultimate expression of 80s turbocharged muscle, a street-legal nightmare for anyone that dared to line up next to it. Buick took the already potent Grand National and handed it over to ASC McLaren, who turned it into an all-out performance monster. The heart of the GNX was a heavily modified turbocharged 3.8-liter V6 with a larger Garrett T3 turbo, a better intercooler, and an advanced ECU tune. The 87 Buick GNX boasted a factory-rated 276 horsepower and 360 pounds of torque, but in reality, these numbers were sandbagged. Real-world figures hovered closer to 300 horsepower and 400 pounds of torque. The GNX obliterated the quarter mile in 12.7 seconds at 113 miles per hour, embarrassing Corvettes, Camaros, and just about anything else with a V8. Only 547 units were produced, each featuring a blacked-out menacing exterior, unique badging, and a number plaque on the dash. Today, a 87 Buick GNX in pristine condition will set you back over $150,000, with some crossing the $200,000 mark. This was the last hurrah for Buick performance before the turbocharged muscle car era faded, and it remains one of the most feared cars of its time. Coming in at number 6, we have the Chrysler Turbine Car. The 1963 to 1964 Chrysler Turbine Car was a radical attempt to redefine automotive propulsion, powered by a gas turbine engine instead of a traditional piston-driven motor. Chrysler's A831 turbine produced 130 horsepower and 425 pounds of torque, promising an incredibly smooth ride with minimal moving parts, just 60 components, compared to the hundreds in a conventional engine. This turbine design required no radiator, ran on nearly any combustible liquid including diesel, kerosene, and tequila, and operated with significantly less wear and tear. A total of 55 cars were manufactured. 5 prototypes and a limited run of 50 units were a public user program. Chrysler loaned them out to carefully selected families across the U.S. for real-world testing. While praised for its futuristic operation and near-silent performance, drawbacks included lagging throttle response, poor fuel economy, roughly 11 to 13 miles per gallon, and high production costs, making it unfeasible for mass production. By 1966, 46 of the cars were destroyed per government agreements, leaving just 9 surviving units today, mostly in museums or private collections. Next at number 5, it's the Maserati Bora 4.9 Twin-Turbo by Mistral. The Maserati Bora 4.9 Twin-Turbo by Mistral was an extremely rare aftermarket modification of Maserati's mid-engine supercar, transforming the Bora 4.9 into a forced-induction powerhouse. The standard Bora came with a 4.9-liter naturally aspirated V8, producing 320 horsepower. However, select tuners, most notably Mistral, experimented with twin turbocharging, significantly increasing power output and performance. With a turbo upgrade, the Bora's V8 was rumored to produce over 500 horsepower, giving it a top speed exceeding 180 miles per hour, far beyond the factory-rated 174 miles per hour of the naturally aspirated version. The twin-turbo modification drastically improved acceleration, pushing the Bora into the league of supercars. Maserati's factory never officially produced a twin-turbo Bora, making these tuner-modified versions incredibly rare. Only a handful of Bora 4.9 twin-turbo by Mistral cars are known to exist today, and their exact specifications vary depending on modifications. Giving the exclusivity and performance potential, Maserati Boras command exceptionally high values when they surface under the hammer, appealing to collectors who seek the rarest and most unique Maseratis. The highest selling price of a 1977 Maserati Bora 4.9-liter at auction over the last 3 years was $25,200. Taking the number 4 position is the 1980 Lotus Esprit Essex Turbo. The Lotus Esprit Essex Turbo was a landmark in Lotus history, marking the introduction of turbocharging to the Esprit lineup. Built in 1980 as a limited edition high-performance model, only 45 units were produced, making it one of the rarest Esprits ever built. Power came from a 2.2-liter turbocharged inline-4, producing 210 horsepower and 200 pounds of torque. This gave the lightweight Esprit a 0-60 time of just under 6 seconds and a top speed of 150 miles per hour, making it one of the quickest Lotus models of its time. The turbocharged engine was paired with a 5-speed manual gearbox, sending power to the rear wheels, while a strengthened chassis and upgraded suspension ensured it could handle the added performance. The Essex Turbo Esprit featured a distinctive paint job, finished in Essex Petroleum Blue with red and chrome striping, a nod to the Formula One sponsorship deal between Lotus and Essex Petroleum. The car also came with a specialized interior featuring digital instruments, leather upholstery, and a Panasonic roof-mounted stereo, a futuristic touch for the era. With only 45 units ever produced, the Esprit Essex Turbo is among the most desirable and collectible Lotus models. It laid the foundation for the Turbo Esprit that followed in 1981, proving the potential of forced induction in lightweight supercars. At number 3, it's the De Tomaso Pantera GT5S Twin-Turbo. The De Tomaso Pantera GT5S Twin-Turbo is an ultra-rare high-performance evolution of the iconic Pantera GT5S, a model already known for its aggressive styling and raw V8 power. While fewer than 183 GT5S models were produced between 1985 and 1990, the twin-turbo versions were even scarcer, with likely only a handful ever built as custom high-horsepower upgrades. At its core, the GT5S featured a 5.8-liter 351 Cleveland V8, but with twin turbochargers fitted by specialists such as Dennis Quella's Pantera Performance or other aftermarket tuners. Output skyrocketed to 600-plus horsepower, far beyond the factory-rated 345 horsepower of the naturally aspirated version. This gave the twin-turbo Pantera supercar rivaling acceleration with 0-60 estimated at under 4 seconds and a top speed exceeding 200 miles per hour, making it one of the fastest Panteras ever built. Unlike its predecessor, the GT5S dropped the fiberglass fender flares of earlier GT5 models in favor of seamlessly integrated wide-body styling, giving it a more refined, muscular look. Massive 345-section rear tires provided traction for the immense power, while upgraded brakes and suspension helped manage the beastly performance. With only a handful of twin-turbo GT5S models in existence, this high-powered Pantera is among the rarest and most extreme variants of the De Tomaso's legendary supercar. Coming in at number 2, we have the 1985 Buick Riviera Convertible Turbocharged. If you're looking for one of the rarest turbo Buicks ever, the 1985 Buick Riviera Convertible Turbo is it. Buick only made 49 of these drop-top beauties with the turbocharged 3.8-liter V6, making it one of the most exclusive turbocharged American cars of the 1980s. With 200 horsepower and a brutal 300 pounds of torque, this Riviera wasn't just about top-down cruising. It had serious turbocharged punch. The Garrett turbo and sequential fuel injection gave it effortless low-end torque, making highway pulls and city driving feel surprisingly quick for a full-size luxury car. Paired with a smooth-shifting 4-speed automatic, the Turbo V6 made the Riviera feel far more athletic than its size suggested. Despite weighing over 4,000 pounds, the Riviera Convertible Turbo could still hold its own in straight-line acceleration, running 0-60 in about 9 seconds. Not bad for a car built for cruising and comfort. The plush interior, digital dashboard, and classic Riviera styling made it an elegant ride, but the turbocharger under the hood set it apart from the average boulevard cruiser. Finishing off that sense of luxury are full-size wire wheel covers and white wall tires. The 85 Buick Riviera convertibles are recognized among the very best performance cars of the 1980s and easily fetch $40,000 plus. And at number 1 is the 1988 Callaway Sledgehammer Corvette. The 1988 Callaway Sledgehammer Corvette was a one-off experiment that redefined what was possible for a road-going car. Built by Callaway Cars, this heavily modified C4 Corvette shattered records, hitting 254 miles per hour, a speed that made it the world's fastest street-legal car for over a decade. At its core was a 5.7-liter twin-turbocharged V8, pushing out 898 horsepower and 772 pounds of torque. This power was routed through a 6-speed manual transmission with extensive chassis, aerodynamic, and suspension modifications to handle the extreme speed. Unlike other high-speed builds, the Sledgehammer retained full street legality, complete with air conditioning, a stereo, and power accessories, proving it wasn't just a stripped-down racer. Callaway's engineers developed the car at their Connecticut facility before handing it to John Lingenfelter, who piloted it to the record-breaking speed at the Transportation Research Center in Ohio. Despite its dominance, no additional Sledgehammers were built, making this Corvette a true one-off legend. The Sledgehammer has since become an icon, occasionally surfacing at auctions where it has sold for over $600,000. With a combination of brutal performance, a record-setting top speed, and legendary status among enthusiasts, the Callaway Sledgehammer Corvette remains one of the most significant high-performance street cars ever built. If classic performance and rare rides are your thing, don't forget to like and subscribe for more legendary machines.